Jean-François, I'm going to take a wild guess. You watched the Grey Cup game.
I didn't, and I feel so ashamed
Mon
all
Dieu!
day. All day I was ashamed at not having seen it, but I did see the reaction of Mr. Duquois.
Bon, après ça, what did you think? We took calls on this. A lot of people didn't have a problem with it. Some people had a big problem with it. And to be fair, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon seems to be painting Monsieur Descroix as a bit of a hero for what he did.
Well, not only him. I mean, on social networks and on talk shows, he expressed something that francophone athletes of many kinds and stripes and sports have been saying for decades about the place of French in Canadian teams, and specifically the fact that the national anthem was only in English in the previous game, the lack of French in the theater in Hamilton, which one would say, well, it's normal. Well, it's normal, but the Alouettes were there. Shouldn't there have been some acknowledgement other than the national hymn, which was very well sung in both languages, I'm told. But it adds up. Every other month, we have a story of a French Quebec athlete that feels marginalized because he's a francophone. And so it was not surprising that he said that. The emotion with which he said it was somewhat stunning, but I think it really underlines a reality that French athletes know and live with.
You know, when Natasha and I were talking about this, kind of trying to figure out where to lay the blame, Natasha had brought up the city of Hamilton. Possibly the Alouettes might have, said something, done something since they were going to be playing there. I blame this entirely on the Canadian Football League. This is not their first Grey Cup game. It's not the first time a Montreal team has been in it. Where do you lay the blame here?
The Canadian government sends the signal that francophones, although a minority, should be seen and heard and acknowledged. But the government itself cannot get its act together. Recently, we learned that in global affairs, there was bias against francophone diplomats, and then we heard that at the RCMP, bilingual posts were held by people who didn't know how to speak French. And so the Canadian government gives the tone of talking the talk but not walking the walk. And then Canadian organizations in which you have francophones and Quebecers should relay, this responsibility that they have to make sure that French is acknowledged. But since they don't have a very clear signal from the federal government, they say, hey, why should we be better? And it's always going against the grain, to have francophones acknowledged. But the lack of consistency from the federal government sends a signal that it's not that important.
I have to say, Jean-François, while I agree with the sentiment, and to some degree, I also agree with the passion of the player, of Duquois, I feel like it somehow takes away from the victory. Like now we're talking about this, rather than savoring this moment. We have not had a Grey Cup in so long. This was such a phenomenal game. This is the last thing we should be talking about.
That's true. And when you watch his reaction, okay, obviously he's not prepared. He was not prepared for victory, as many others, clearly. And what he did is first he tried to improvise, and then he said, thanks for the support. And somehow in his head he said, support? What support? And then he raved against the lack of support outside Quebec. And so it's his line of thought that was interesting, and he went to a real place. He didn't go to, and I agree with you, Natasha. It shifts the focus from victory to this debate we're having, but it's not for lack of authenticity.
All right, let me kind of shift topics here and move down to the next one. We brought this up earlier as well. So I think we may have mentioned this last week, Jean-François, this idea where Francois Legault thinks there's nothing wrong with spending $7 million to bring a bunch of NHL players from, of all places, Los Angeles to Quebec City for a couple of exhibition games. There has been very negative reaction to this. I know today Quebec Solidaire called for the Auditor General to get involved. There were a couple of people within the CAQ as well who came out and spoke out, including Bernard Dranville, saying this was not perhaps a great idea. What do you think? And do you think now, with this negative reaction, there's a chance François Legault backs down and says, I made a mistake?
So I think basically they put themselves in a terrible bind, because now they're saying that this was to try and attract attention of the head of the NH, Gary Bettman, but he knows, because these matches pre-season have been going on for years, and at least in 3 cities, including Salt Lake City and Hamilton, they've been done without any government help at all. So if he looks at Quebec City, that's paying $5 to $7 million, they think we're suckers, clearly, because other cities didn't have to pay these kinds of amounts. And then we know that Éric Girard is supposed to meet him in late November in New York City. Mm-hmm. And so if they pull the plug now, will look like incompetent suckers. So that's their choice.
So it's suckers now or incompetent suckers later. That's the
exactly
choice.
So.
I see.
Great
I'm not sure which one is better.
Let me see here.
I haven't decided yet.
Oh, my. All right.
I mean, I would can't they just at least renegotiate? Can't they go back and at least say, look, instead of $7.5 million, hey, we'll give you $2 million?
No.
Even that.
Then they look like cheap, incompetent suckers if they do that.
Oh, let's add cheap to that mix.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about Éric Duhaime. He had a confidence vote this weekend, and 77% approval is what he got. What do you make of that? We're going to be speaking with him next.
Yeah, I'm of both minds on that. First, this is the guy without whom there wouldn't have been a Congress this weekend, or if there had been, it would have been like a sect-like meeting that no media would have ever covered. He's the man that brought the Conservative Party out of its anonymous status to the light and made it a player, a small player, but a real player in politics. So for his first vote of confidence, I would have given him 110%. We're here because of you. But since the vote was not taken immediately after his rise, now the criticism piles up. You haven't been able to get one seat in the National Assembly, and then in the Jean Talon riding, the support for the Conservatives dropped by half. They went from 12 to 6%. So the question they're asking now is not, what have you done for us 2 years ago? It's, what will you be able to do for us next? And they're not sure that he's a good investment for the future. And so that's why he gets only 77%. And worse than that is the paucity of applause, even when this result was given. I thought that was the worst part.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Well, we're going to find out if he thought that was interesting as well next. He's going to join us. Jean-François, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.